Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cavoukian, and I'm here to talk to you about the ethical treatment of personal data and talk to you about privacy by design. But I always want to start by dispelling the myths associated with privacy. Privacy is not about secrecy. It's not about having something to hide. Quite the opposite. Privacy is all about control. It's about personal control over the uses of your personal data. User control is critical. Freedom of choice. And the Germans have a wonderful term for this called informational self-determination. Big term, simple concept that they enshrined as a right in their constitution I think in 1983. It should be the individual who determines the fate of his or her personal information, because it is only the individual who knows the context associated with the data and whether it's sensitive or not. To some people, the same data has no value, no sensitivity, whereas to someone else it means a lot. So it's only the individual who can make the determination of whether they choose to release the data or not. Context is key. And I always like to lead by talking about how essential privacy is to freedom. It forms the foundation of our freedoms. It is essential to innovation, prosperity, creativity. You cannot have freedom without privacy. Surveillance is the antithesis of privacy. It's the exact opposite. And one of the negative consequences of surveillance is it makes you go inward. It shrinks your cognitive bandwidth. It leads you away from blue sky thinking, innovation, and creativity. It's what we want to avoid at all costs. Let me tell you about privacy by design. I call it the decade of privacy by design. I developed this years ago in the late 90s. It really took off after 9/11, but in 2010 it was unanimously passed as an international standard by the International Assembly of Privacy Commissioners and Data Protection Authorities. And it was intended to complement regulatory compliance, which comes after the fact. This was a model of prevention. I wanted to prevent the privacy harms from arising, much like a medical model of prevention. And I was amazed that it was unanimously passed. But then afterwards, when I talked to my colleagues, my fellow commissioners, I realized that they shared the same view that I did, that in this day and age of ubiquitous computing, massive online connectivity, social media abounding, we as commissioners were only seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of all the privacy harms that were taking place. The majority of the harms were evading our detection and remaining largely unknown, unchallenged, unregulated. And that was unacceptable to all of us. So we felt that we couldn't rely exclusively on regulatory compliance after the fact. We had to have a model, a proactive model of prevention to complement regulatory compliance in order to ensure the future of privacy. And we've had great luck. It's been translated to over 40 languages, and it's just so exciting. Not a day would go by when I was commissioner when I wouldn't hear from some jurisdiction and what they were doing and how they were doing it. JIPDEC, the Japanese Information Processing Development Center, was an early adopter of privacy by design. And they sent me this just before my last term as commissioner ended. And they said, we insist on the principle of positive sum, not zero sum, which I'll explain in a moment. And they've become enlightened with privacy by design. I was so touched by this. Let me explain the zero sum, how we need to get rid of that. The existing prevailing model in the world is based on zero sum, which means you can have an increase in one area, a positive gain in privacy, to the exclusion of the other area, security, such that the two total to a sum of zero. But I can assure you, it was never privacy that gained over security, and nor am I suggesting that it should be, but I sure as heck didn't want the reverse to take place. So the essential mindset of privacy by design is get rid of zero-sum, either-or, win-lose thinking. Get rid of it and substitute positive sum, which means you can have two positive gains in two areas at the same time. Privacy and security, privacy and data analytics, privacy and business interests. You can have both. It's a false dichotomy that it has to be either-or. And it's as simple and as difficult as getting rid of versus and replacing it with the power of and. But we can do this, and we've done it repeatedly, and I'll give you a few examples in a moment. There are 7 foundational principles to privacy by design. I'm just going to focus on a few of them. I've talked about the need to be proactive so you can prevent the privacy harms from arising. Privacy as the default setting is critical. It means that you don't have to ask for privacy. You don't have to search for the opt-out box that says, do not use my information for any other purpose. No, you are given privacy automatically as the default setting. You will automatically get privacy. You won't have to ask for it. What that means is the information you give for a particular purpose will only be used for that purpose unless the company or the government department comes back to you and seeks your positive consent to use it for a secondary use, which might develop down the road. It is a total game changer, which goes from negative consent to positive consent. It's huge. Embedded in design speaks for itself. If you have privacy seamlessly baked into the data architecture, into the code, it's a permanent. It's there forever. I've talked about positive sum, not zero sum. It is absolutely essential to privacy by design, to preserving privacy well into the future. Let me talk about security for a moment. While privacy subsumes a much broader set of protections than security alone, if you don't have strong security from end to end with full lifecycle protection, in this day and age of massive daily cybersecurity attacks, you're not going to have any privacy. You must have a very strong foundation of security. It's essential. And visibility and transparency, you've got to make the data available to the individual to whom it pertains. Not only because it's their data, it belongs to them, but because they know if the data you're holding on them is accurate or not. The quality of the data goes up dramatically when you give data subjects access to their data because they can correct it if you've got the mistaken information. It's a win-win all around. And respect for user privacy, of course, that's essential. If you keep it focused, user-centric, the rest falls into place. So this is as simple and as difficult as, for me, it's like motherhood, but I know it's difficult for many companies that haven't been doing this. But the end result is much greater ethical treatment of personal data from start to finish. And we've had great success with this. While I was Privacy Commissioner of Ontario for 3 terms, and we partnered with all the leading tech companies. Think of any major tech company, Microsoft, Intel, HPE, Oracle, IBM, of course, and I'm sure I'm leaving out many of them. We produced 22 papers that appear in this major document. It was a compilation of all those papers to show that you can do privacy and. We didn't want privacy by design to be considered an academic construct or some theoretical framework. No. While I was commissioner, it had to work on the ground right then and there. So take a look at this paper, and you'll see all the different areas in which you can have privacy and whatever it is you're doing. The ethical treatment of data is critical, and it's predicated on individuals to whom the data relates, knowing what you're doing with their information. Transparency, accountability, absolutely critical. Now recently, last year, the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, Danielle Terrien, went to the federal government and said, we need to upgrade our privacy laws. They no longer reflect the highest level of protection. They're dated. PIPEDA, the federal private sector law, was developed in the early 2000s. And we need to integrate privacy by design into it. And in February of this year, the federal government Standing Committee on Access, Privacy, and Ethics developed this paper. The cover was Towards Privacy by Design, how we needed to upgrade PIPEDA and embed privacy by design into it. So it was ideal, and I'm sure we're going to see that later this year. And as you know, the Facebook debacle happened a few months ago. 87 million Facebook users' data was released to Cambridge Analytica and third parties unknown, of course, without the consent of the individuals involved. We have to say never again. We will not allow this to happen again. That's what we have to work on. The Economist had a wonderful cover. They said the epic fail in response to what they called reputational meltdown of Facebook. In addition to this, what's happening in the last couple of years is concern for privacy is at an all-time high. I've been in this business well over 20 years. I have never seen public opinion polls consistently in the 90 percentile. 91% of adults agreed that consumers have lost all control over their information. Canadian Privacy Commissioner did a survey. 90% of Canadians expressed the same view as the Americans. And this study by Professor Turo said that 91% of people disagreed that if companies give me a discount, it's a fair exchange for them to collect information about me without my knowing it. They said, no, we disagree with that. So the tide is turning. Concern for privacy is high, and we need stronger protection. And the good news is we're getting it. So the EU General Data Protection Regulation came into effect May 25th of this year. It's huge. It's an overarching privacy law that is replacing the 28 privacy laws of the 28 member countries. And for the first time, it includes privacy by design in the law. Data protection by design, privacy as the default. Huge. It changes everything. It's a game changer, like from black to white in terms of elevating privacy. And while I would not go so far as to say this, Information Age a couple of years ago said it's not too much of a stretch to say that if you implement privacy by design, you've mastered the GDPR. It is a stretch to say that, but I think what this shows you is that companies, especially in the US, are embracing privacy by design because you don't need a regulation to do it. You just have to follow the 7 foundational principles. And I'm now offering privacy by design certification because companies have been asking me to do it. So you come to Ryerson University, you come to me, we get your consent, and then I send you to KPMG, which is the company we're partnering with to go in and look under the hood into the operations of your company to issue a report to tell me, are you actually doing privacy by design? And then I will issue certification. It's a real win-win, and it's just taking off. Let me touch on machine learning and artificial intelligence, because there's a lot of concern now about AI. Can we accept it at face value? How confident should we be? Or do we have to look under the hood at the algorithms used? You betcha you do. There's a lot of unfairness now being associated with algorithms, and there's concern. Global Commission on Internet Governance said algorithms aren't necessarily neutral. They include built-in biases and maybe discriminatory. We have to take a look under the hood. And that's what's taking place now. That's the good news. A colleague of mine, Fotini Agrifioti, who is now actually with the RBC, heading up their AI division, she said privacy by design is the key to future of artificial intelligence. So we're getting a lot of interest in this area. So I wrote about this a little while ago in the Globe and Mail. This is my op-ed, that you have to have privacy controls put back in the hands of the individuals, and that has to be reflected in AI. We developed something called Smart Data that we're featuring, which is all about developing smart data software agents that give you personal control in AI of your information. So this is just to hopefully intrigue you, to give you an idea that the ethical considerations associated with privacy and artificial intelligence are being looked at in a big way, so stay tuned. AI, is it fair? A lot of people are saying, no, it's not, that there's a lot of bias reflected in it. I'm going to go through very quickly. I've got a number of slides. They're there for your information that you can dig deeper into this. But I wanted to tell you about the Supreme Court of Canada case that just came out last month. And it was all about how tools have been developed that were tested in terms of recidivism of people in incarcerated facilities, but the tools were developed on non-Indigenous populations. And Mr. Ewart, who was a Métis individual, said they're basing their belief on my recidivism on data that doesn't apply to me. It has bias in it, it's inaccurate, and those predictions do not fall upon me. And the Supreme Court agreed. So I think this was a huge step in Canada saying we have to treat data ethically and properly. And this case will drive that forward. So I developed something called AI Ethics by Design, which is all about embedding greater transparency and accountability into the underlying algorithms that are used to develop the training sets for AI. So hopefully the ethical principles that abound will be applied to the treatment of personal data. We need algorithmic oversight and responsibility. We need respect for privacy, of course, as a fundamental human right, and embedding privacy data protection as the default. We have to be proactive and doing this in ways that can examine all of this before the harm takes place, and we need all of this very strongly documented. So stay tuned. We'll see how this develops. If you have any interest, I'm offering a Privacy by Design online course because there's been such interest in this area. So we thought, let's get it out there. There's a lot of my colleagues from around the world have been taking this, and so I thought I'll let you know if you have any interest in exploring this. Let me end, ladies and gentlemen, by asking you to consider embedding privacy and security upfront proactively into all that we do. Because that, in my view, focuses on preventing the privacy harms from arising, which reflects the most ethical treatment of personal data. And you can address the privacy and security concerns at the same time. We can abandon zero-sum, either-or, win-lose models and gain by having privacy and security and ethical treatment of data all embedded into the process. We can do this. So thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Please email me if you have any questions. If you feel like following me on Twitter, I tweet every morning between 5:30 and 6 a.m., the leading stories of the day. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.